Hi, or should I say, yasus. I'm back from Greece. Long time no see. I've just got back from a lovely long holiday in Greece. I was there for 10 days and it was fantastic. So much so that as soon as I got back to London, I was hit full on with the holiday blues. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the gluten-free food there. So this isn't going to be a video like I usually do with like a day-by-day recount of what I did, because I predominantly just put the camera down, read my book, sat on the beach. It was so good. We actually went because James's parents came over from New Zealand and we met them in Greece, and we've not seen them in 2.5 years. So it was just a really lovely time. They really looked after us there, so I felt very lucky. It's definitely a holiday I wouldn't have been able to have without them. So I'm feeling very grateful. So I just wanted to enjoy it, and I really did. But of course, I made some notes about my experiences, and I'm going to talk to you about where I ate, what I found safe to eat, what I didn't find safe to eat, what the supermarkets were like, the general knowledge around gluten-free food in Greece, and then some tips that I would definitely suggest and would do for myself if I was to travel there again, which I definitely will, because it's like the best place ever. But first, I want to give you a little rundown of what we did. We flew to Athens and arrived there in the night time to meet up with James's parents, and we stayed in Athens for 2 nights. Really only one full day, because on the third day we took a ferry to Paros. So we didn't have that long in Athens, but I definitely feel like I made the most of it with gluten-free food, and we'll get to that in a tick. And then the next day we took a ferry to Paros, which is a lovely island that was about a 2.5-hour ferry ride, about a 40-minute flight from Athens, not too far at all. And the island itself, I think, is about 60 miles around. If you were to drive around it, I think it would just take over an hour, but there's about 12,000 people, so still pretty big, to be honest. It wasn't like completely remote. From what I've heard, it's a nice place to travel to if you don't want the like Mykonos, Santorini type vibes, because it's a lot more chill, but still extremely beautiful. And we had a little wee house, and we stayed there for about 8 nights right by the beach, and all I did was just lay down. It was great. And of course, do some sightseeing, visiting the villages, eating a lot of food. Fantastic. Highly recommend. Highly, highly recommend. I wish I was there right now. James is actually still there, and I'm so jealous, but I had to come back a little bit early because I need to work to, earn money. But unfortunately, my restaurant has had a huge electrical failure, and so I've got no work for the next week or so, which is a little bit stressful, but oh well. Oh well. Could have still been in Greece. Oh well. God, it was beautiful. And the water was so warm. Anyway, let's talk about the gluten-free food, and we'll start with Athens. And there were actually a lot of places I was recommended to eat in Athens, and I only managed to go to 2, which is unfortunate, but I do have a little map of places to eat that I will add in the description like I do with my other travel videos. So the places I did eat were Greek Stories and Arcadia, which were right next to each other and also owned by the same person. So Greek Stories was the first place I went to, and it might have been my favourite meal of the trip. Not because everything else was bad after that, just because it was so good. Greek Stories is 100% gluten-free, and they knew all about gluten. I felt very, very safe there. And for lunch I had like a chicken kebab deconstructed type thing. It came with gluten-free pita bread, chicken, like half a plate full of fries, and some tomato and red onion and some sauce. It was so good, and I'm so glad that I got it, because it was probably the only chance I got for the rest of the trip to eat something like that. So yeah, really happy with that choice, and 1,000,000% recommend going there. Greek Stories and Arcadia on one of the main restaurant roads right by the Acropolis, and like right next to the museum for the Acropolis. So if you're going to do the sightseeing stuff in Athens, you're probably going to end up there anyway, and please go there. Or go to Arcadia, which is their like sister restaurant. They've got a restaurant in between. The staff were really knowledgeable about what was gluten-free at Arcadia, because not everything was. I got a fig, cheese, cranberry, walnut salad and fresh gluten-free bread on the side. It was fantastic. Now, I just want to give you a bit of a warning here. I really got into salads on this trip, and that's not because they were the only option that I had. I generally found like I had a lot of options, but the salads in Greece kind of slap. Every salad I had, I was like, oh, okay, this is what a salad should be. I understand now. Oh, and we did eat somewhere else. It was at the hotel restaurant called Divani Hotel Acropolis, I think. And it was a stunning hotel. Like, they had a glass wall in the basement area that showed these old ruins. It was fantastic. And they also had a really, really good understanding of gluten-free food as well. So I just got a lovely risotto on the first night. And they brought out hummus and breadsticks for everyone to nibble on. But because I'd said I was gluten-free, they actually got me some gluten-free bread and my own little hummus pot to eat as well. I was like, wow. I love Greece. So that's all the places I managed to eat, but there were loads more that I really wanted to try. Lots of places that are apparently great for celiacs, like Avocado, Veganaki, Yi, and on top of that, one bakery that I was nearly harassed to go to by several people on Instagram, because apparently it's that called Marina Cosmos Bakery, I think. Apparently they have wonderful gluten-free options, but it was quite a way out of town. So I would suggest you going to that if you don't have only a couple of days in Athens, because it's like a bit of a journey to get to, but I hear it's great and I'm really sad I missed out on it. Now we go to Paros, which is the island that I stayed at, and it is a lot smaller, 12,000 people, so I knew that perhaps I was going to have a way more difficult time finding gluten-free food. But on the first night we went to this place called Curo Rosso Pizza, and they had a whole gluten-free pizza menu, and their pizzas were divine. They were also really good with gluten-free food. In fact, the lady that was serving us, she even went around the table and to everyone's dishes she was like, you can try that if you like, but you can't have that, because she knew what was in everything. And that was delicious. Highly recommend. They also had a great cat there, Dimitri, who was the manager. He was lovely, very attentive. Curo Rosso was in Parakia, which is sort of the port village town that your ferry comes into, and in that area as well I went to a place called Exetion, which was actually a recommendation from the Gluten Free Suitcase. She had a post from 2019 that came up on the first page of Google. So we went there for one lunch. I got some fries, they were delicious. I got a salad again with the most hugest piece of feta on a salad I've ever seen. The other place we managed to go to was in Naousa, and we went to a wonderful place called Safran. It was pretty fancy, pretty high dining, but it was really, really, really delicious. I had a watermelon salad this time. I know, had a lot of salads, but it was fantastic. It was like watermelon, piped feta, something that I think was a peeled grape, but I'm not really sure. It's kind of lychee-like, but not a lychee. Still don't really know. Basil. It was just fantastic. And I also tried a traditional dish called married fava, which was here like fava bean grounded up. I think it's often had as a dip, but basically it's just fava bean, capers on top. It was delicious. That was really nice, and I always appreciate being able to have like a traditional dish that's gluten free, because then I don't feel like I'm missing out so much on like food culture, if that makes sense. Now those are sort of the main places worth mentioning on Paros. The other places I went to were just for like a casual salad, which you could probably get anywhere. But in terms of gluten-free food, there were a couple more I didn't go to that I would have liked to try, but just didn't get the time. One was the Little Green Rocket, which we're actually going to go to, but it was kind of bad weather and I wanted to stay in, so we just ate in that night. And that is Mediterranean Asian fusion food, which sounds interesting, and the menu looked pretty good as well. And I heard that it is really good for gluten-free food, and they've even got their own gluten-free soy sauce, which I have no idea where they got it from, because I could not find gluten-free soy sauce anywhere. The other one was the All Day Taverna, and there's another word after that, but I've forgotten it off the top of my head, and apparently that's really good for gluten-free food, and they're really knowledgeable about what's gluten-free. But we did stay at a place with a kitchen, so our other meals we enjoyed at home. Next up, supermarkets. There was not a shortage of supermarkets in Greece. In fact, I think it was one of the easiest places to find supermarkets that I have travelled to recently, especially in like city centres or on a small island. There were a lot on Paros, and because that was the place where I did most of my supermarket shopping, that's sort of what I'm going to base my opinions on here. But please know this could be widely varied across the entirety of Greece, and I'm sure it is. One of my favourite ones was called Kritikos, which I think that's how you pronounce it, although I'm not too sure. Although quite varied in selection, even just in Parakia, one of the ones I went into had a proper gluten-free section full of lots of gluten-free foods, like from the brand No Glute, which is a European gluten-free brand. It was really good for sweet gluten-free food, like wafers and wafers and wafers. There was a lot of wafers and chocolate biscuits and cereals and stuff like that. My other favourite place was a bigger supermarket called Sklavenitis. although that also might not be how you say it. And that place was wonderful. It had like every European char bread under the sun in that one. And they also had amazing gluten-free labels on their shelves to point you in the right direction very quickly on what was gluten-free. Labels like this that I may have found one on the ground and decided to take it with me. That's gluten-free in Greek. And that one was even good for plant-based food, which was a surprise. I found Beyond Meat there, and I found a couple of Greek vegan meat-based brands as well. The other place we went to was Market Inn, which I found had a really interesting range of gluten-free crisps, but not much else. But that was just that specific Market Inn, so it might not have been good. People might have much better experiences. The other strange thing that I noticed was a lot of the gluten-free food is packaged in yellow. I don't know why, but everything I bought was yellow, which kind of makes it a little bit easier to find. Not everything that's yellow is going to be gluten-free, of course, but just all of the gluten-free brands were in yellow. Foods to watch out for. Now, I'm not going to talk about things like bread, because I'm sure you know that, or things that are covered in pastry like spanakopita and like baklava, because I'm sure you're aware that you can't have pastry. But I'm going to talk about sort of more common sneaky little things. Moussaka, which might be obvious to you, but I didn't realize it had like a thickened sauce in it that is usually made from wheat flour. Greek Stories definitely had a gluten-free moussaka if you want to try it, but the rest of them were not gluten-free. Falafel. Now, I usually find falafel to be naturally gluten-free, but I did find some places added breadcrumbs or they were fried in a fryer with other things. Another one along that line, meatballs almost always contains breadcrumbs. But something that I found that was very useful, a lot of the menus that I looked at had exactly what was in the dish. So for something like meatballs, it would say meatballs, lamb meat, parsley, breadcrumbs. So it was pretty clear that you couldn't eat them. Not everywhere was like that, but a lot of places did have very descriptive menus, which I appreciated. Sagnaki cheese, unfortunately, is coated and deep fried. Parsley dip, I've heard contains breadcrumbs, unfortunately. Actually, and other dips like tiramisu salata sometimes have like a thickener that is generally wheat based in them as well. Something that I would generally be careful with is dips. That's just a few things, but of course make sure you're checking everything. Now time for some foods that tend to be naturally gluten free in Greece, although make sure you're checking. Don't just take my word for it, double check with everything. Fava dip, like I mentioned before, and that's just blended fava beans and spices, which is usually great. Tzatziki, like a yogurt cucumber dip, fantastic. Same with hummus normally. Salads, as I've been demonstrating, but once again, in the menus it would always describe what exactly went into the salad, and there are some with like croutons in them, so just watch out for those ones. And there was also barley rusk in quite a few salads as well. Obviously not something we can have. To be honest, don't really know what it is. Yogurt, honey and walnuts, which is to this day my new favourite breakfast. It is exactly what I said it is. You can find that a lot in places that offer brunch or breakfast, and it's delicious, especially yogurt, honey, walnuts and fruit. Pretty good. I found a lot of gelato and ice cream that was gluten-free, but obviously I would just put the same precautions on that you usually would for when you go to a gelato place, like for cross-contamination and stuff like that. Tahini, just blended sesames, and it is the best. Bought a lot of chocolate tahini home myself. And as I mentioned before, which is great news for people like me, fries. Fries are quite often fried separately from other things to make them taste like fresher, and that's really good for us gluten-free people. As long as the potatoes themselves aren't covered in a batter or flour, generally okay. So what is the general knowledge around gluten-free food like in Greece? Now this is a big question, and I wasn't there for months and months, and I didn't visit everywhere. But the general vibe I got was that some people really, really understood it. Some people had no idea. For example, I was trying to find a gluten-free ice cream, like a packaged one, and I didn't have my phone on me to do like a Google Translate. So I asked the lady, I'm like, which of these ice creams are gluten-free? And she's like, oh no, they've all got chocolate and nuts. And I was like, okay. So she pointed out like a sorbet one. I was like, oh, I don't really feel like that. Anyway, I went back later and I used the scanner, and it turned out a lot of them were actually gluten-free, but there was just not that knowledge around what gluten is, so I couldn't be pointed in the right direction the first time. There was also a couple of times, not many, where I had to explain what gluten is, like that it's not just bread, but flour and yada yada yada, but that was fine. And I also had some people that were just so great and so caring about it as well. I would say Greece probably doesn't have the same level of knowledge of gluten as the UK or Italy or Spain, but in no way is it like so difficult that I wouldn't go there. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like Italy for gluten-free food and 1 being like somewhere bad for gluten-free food. I was trying to think of a bad place. I would probably put it at about like a 6. Like a 6.5. Maybe 7. Lastly, I'm going to give you a couple of tips for Greece that you might find useful. You might already know. Obviously, a lot of these could be for any travel, but always best to stay in a place with a kitchen if you're staying for longer than 3 days. 1, saves you money. 2, don't have to worry about eating out or where you're going to eat. And sometimes on holiday, that's just not something that you want to think about or devote all of your brain space to. And it's nice just to cook yourself something easy in the kitchen. 2, I think bringing a translated celiac travel card with you to Greece is a really good idea. Of course, I also recommend learning a few phrases in the country that you're traveling to every time. But I found Greek quite hard to get my head around. 3, the salads are actually really good. I know I've said that, but I just want to reiterate. Usually if someone goes, oh, the only gluten-free option we have is a salad, I'm like, but in Greece, I would choose a salad over other gluten-free options. They were just fantastic. 4, Greece follows the European labelling laws, so you can feel pretty safe in knowing that what you're reading on the back of the label is exactly what's in the food, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. 5, the iced coffees in Greece slapped. I don't know what it is about them, but they were phenomenal. They were completely unique to any iced coffee I'd ever had, and yeah, I love them. You should try them. 6, in terms of things to bring to Greece, I found that most of the supermarkets had all the staples and I didn't really need to bring anything. I have heard that sometimes it's difficult to find gluten-free bread on the smaller Greek islands. I found it okay. The only thing that I did bring, which I think was necessary because I couldn't find any, was gluten-free crackers. And I do suggest bringing them so you can make yourself a really good cheese board with beautiful olives and Greek cheeses. Lastly, I would just say be smart around things like cross-contamination. If something says gluten-free on the menu but you don't feel reassured that it is properly gluten-free, I wouldn't eat there. I'd say maybe the knowledge around cross-contamination is lacking a little bit. So that's just always something to be aware of and keep in mind when you're ordering some food. But of course, something like a travel card will help you with that. And I'll put a link in my description for a Greek one if you would like to get one for yourself. Anyway, that is my video on my experience on gluten-free food in Greece. Honestly, it was such a beautiful place. There were so many cats. I loved every second of it, and it's somewhere I would definitely recommend traveling. Definitely do not let the fact that you're gluten-free hold you back from traveling to Greece or anywhere really, but especially Greece because it was just stunning. And I highly recommend Paros. A lot of people said to me, don't spend too long in Athens. But just in terms of eating, I'd probably stay a little bit longer than 2 nights. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm going to go be sad that I'm not there anymore. See you later.